Welcome to the table. Enjoy your stool and need lack. Bought by Design, your work is appreciated. Orca, Black Rose, and Dr. Gaius Balder. A bunch of names I actually recognize. Bought by Design, probably the most familiar name to me on that list. Probably.
And for good reason.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. It's been a pretty good weekend so far.
Excellent. Excellent. I must say my weekend is off to a lovely start as well. I spruced up the scene a little bit. It won't be here for long. I'm working on new art, but I thought the gray background just looked terrible. So I added a little bit of motion to it. I don't think it's too busy. I'm worried it might be too busy. Way to start a stream indeed. Thank you so much, Art of Fighting. Kicked us off on the right note.
Yeah, I had on the note of the background. Black and white is very loud. Maybe just tone that down a little bit and then I'll be good.
I'll keep looking. It's not like I created this masterpiece. I mean, I totally created this masterpiece.
100% created this masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
Got motion.
Just a little
Gears are
bit.
turning.
Just a little bit, so you can tell it's a video and not just staring at, like, you know, a 1995 website or something.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the 1995 websites with GIFs in the background that are like 14 pixels by 14 pixels.
Yeah, this is more approaching the, like, 2000s website where everything's moving and has a decent res, at least.
Where's my blinking text?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want blank. I want marquee.
I want my custom cursor with a trail.
Oh, yeah, the cursor trails everywhere. Man. Those sites were my life, man. Yeah, we all made
the Wild West of the original web design.
Mine was a StarCraft clan site was what I made and helped manage. It was not a good site, but we had some really good screenshots of our victories on there. We did some stupid stuff in that game. We played way too much StarCraft. Way too much.
What a game.
That the Space Jam website is still a time capsule to 90s websites.
Oh, yeah, it's still up, isn't it?
Hopefully. Hopefully they'll replace it with Space Jam too.
Oh, yeah, it's still up.
Excellent.
It's still up. It's spacejam.com, if anybody's wondering.
Image maps. Oh,
all right.
I miss image maps.
Oh, it's so terrible. I remember learning how to do image maps in a course like 8 years ago. And I was like, wow, this is literally never going to be used.
When I first learned, we were using image maps to do the like drop down navigation, and I'm like, this feels wrong. I don't feel like I don't think these should be. I don't think these should be images. Like, I feel like this is what CSS is for. It turns out that's exactly what CSS is supposed to be used for.
Now pseudo, show us where the image map touched you on the doll.
It's weird because like this is how you get a cool gradient nav bar. I'm like, or I could just use CSS, but I guess this is back in like the IE7, IE9 days. So it's like you didn't want to do that. You didn't want to use CSS. You want to just make everything images because that browser could display an image. But it was weird. When you change the resolution, it's like, we don't do that. We don't use the web on our phones. What are you talking about?
I mean, if you've ever tried to make a website that targets like IE6 or IE7, that's basically all they can do.
I remember those days.
They display images.
but also the teachers of those days weren't the sharpest. Like, I remember a friend of mine had a story of his teacher. Like, he was struggling to make 4 boxes on the screen in a frame that are all even sized. He was putting all the hard numbers in and nothing was ever coming out right. And he came by with my buddy. He's like, hey, wait, how'd you do that? He's like, 25%.
It turns out you don't have to use fixed units.
Okay. Middle market, AA games, and their decline in the market. We've done a bit of homework on this so that we have some informations. I made one for Pokemon when I was 13. Not for the company, just for my interest in the game. It's how we learn.
Pokemon fan site. I did a StarCraft fan site.
StarCraft guild site. We're pretty similar again.
Yeah, it's almost like we're really similar people or something.
Okay, so to start, I think we need to define what a AA game is. What do we mean by AA? And the easiest way to do this is to understand what a AAA game is.
And a AAA, like these categories are more or less wholesale stolen from the film industry. And basically what defines these categorizations is the budget. It's just how much you spend on it.
What about quadruple A? Have you heard about that?
I have heard that the term is being thrown around. The official stance from the game market is we don't approve.
And AAA plus?
AAA Plus is actually a thing, which is disgusting. AAA Plus is what we're always bitching about, and that is AAA games that have microtransactions.
Well, not just microtransactions. They are based around microtransactions.
The whole game is built as a service to sell microtransactions and monthly passes, but sold as a AAA game.
Yeah, but typically the A's will be the like they said before, the budget, how much budget in there, how much studio size and influence, all that kind of stuff. How much power and resources is behind the project.
The highest budget games of their generation. That is what a AAA game is, because we have to look at a scaling timeline, right? Like, if what today is a AAA is the definition of AAA, then there's never been AAA games before. Because nothing does it to that scale.
Came up.
Yeah, nothing will do it to that scale of today, right? So if you look at the AAA games of old, they're going to be much smaller money-wise than today's games, especially marketing and stuff like that. But they were still the biggest and the best and the biggest production of their day. So they were the day's AAA game. Do we all understand? We agree on that one?
For sure.
No chat arguments. Rowdy people in the front. Microtransactions. One of the reasons I prefer cross-stitching.
Version compatibility.
Yeah, I mean, cross-stitching is an early microtransaction one, right? Because if you want a different color, you got to go buy that color.
It's got a point.
Otherwise, you just got to stitch in one color.
On the note of the highest budget games of their generation, this informs a whole bunch of other things about the game. It informs the scope. You can do more because you've got more people working on it. You've spent more on your staff. It informs the fidelity, graphical and otherwise, because you've got all this money that you can spend on artists to create the highest quality assets, the highest quality music, the highest quality levels, whatever. You can spend all of that money on being the highest fidelity product that you can produce, and that is, I guess I made that a little too broad, but that's like basically
everything.
What the budget can get you is more people to work on more parts of your project for longer to make it really push the envelope as far as fidelity.
So we've now got the biggest teams, the biggest projects, the biggest scopes. It sounds like it would be the most ambitious games out there, and they are ambitious in ways, but they're also super safe games.
Yeah, they are generally made very safe because of the huge amount of money that is put into them. They want to make sure that they can make that money back.
Yeah. You're not going to take a chance and go, let's find out if they like this.
People involved. This money has to come from somewhere, and to get that money, you need to pitch to a lot of people and get it approved. And they're not gonna, if you're gonna take a risk, it's gonna have to be a very calculated one, and they're pretty rare because chances are you're also gonna be competing for this money with other studios and other game ideas. So if you want that money, you're gonna have to make sure that yours is gonna be the one that will excite them the most, but also the one they know that they'll make their money back, because they're not, at the end of the day, it is about making money, and they're not going to give you all like a AAA budget level of funding to fund your kind of passion project if it's not going to make, a sizable return.
Yeah. To put that another way, they're you're coming up and asking them to
Makes me
give
sad
you
'cause,
money.
Like the AA is like that sweet spot of just enough budget to make a high fidelity enough game, but also enough creative freedom that you get very interesting titles out of it.
Yeah. When you're looking for, $40-50 million to people that have that kind of money for a project, or they're not going to like the idea of, hey, we want to make this game that no one's ever tried anything of before. That's probably not going to fly. They'll be like, I'll give you 2.
Which, to be fair, is enough to make a very, very good video game.
Oh yeah, but you're not going to get the world scale budgets.
I think I can hear Des. I don't know if he's muted or something.
No,
I'm not
I can
muted.
hear him. Interesting. That's on your end then.
Yeah.
There we go. You somehow got muted in my OBS.
I guess you
Weird.
just don't like me.
I haven't even opened or clicked it. You were just the thing was grayed out.
Talk about sibling rivalry. You're just like, shut up.
I'm sorry if I was talking over you there.
I don't want to hear this shit.
To me, there's just silence, so I just started talking. I'm sorry.
No worries. Yes.
It was a very valid point, though. We did appreciate it.
And you're 100% right. Yes. But yeah, that all relates to just the same game. That's why the big games, everyone's always like, well, they just release the same game over and over again. And everyone always says that's because they keep buying the same game over and over again. And that's literally the answer. They know they can sell it again, so they can put that much money into making it because they know it'll sell. It's a safe investment.
Another big thing on it too is the marketing budgets for this is a lot larger. And that's another thing that people kind of forget about too, is like how important marketing is to games. Like there's a lot of games out there. There's a lot of very, very good games, and they will not sell well if they don't have the marketing.
Yep.
If they take off really well, the popularity of them will kind of catapult them. Like games, even like early access games such as Valheim, I don't think they really need to do too much marketing because the popularity of the game can do it. But that's very rare for that to happen.
Yeah.
And people don't really notice the actual volume of games that are kind of out there. And even like AA has an issue with like AA is they have to compete with AAA budgeted marketing. And even though their games could be, quality wise the same, that marketing can really trounce them out if they're releasing on like the same weekend, because this other game is going to be everywhere. And if it's still at like the same kind of price point of $60 to $80, it's going to be harder for them to compete for, that person's, monthly or weekly gaming budget.
Yeah. Excellent. So we all just kind of understand and agree on AAA. We can put that to bed. Nobody's disagreeing with us anywhere.
Yeah, maybe just throw down some examples like Grand Theft Auto, like the Rockstar games are AAA studios.
Well, let's
first
put
party
down
Microsoft.
Let's put down some examples like this. Then I'll include the date. So the first game, a little bit of history for you. The first game that people really called and considered a AAA game was the PlayStation X, PlayStation 1, PSX, which was Final Fantasy VII.
And its budget for the day was astronomical. It was huge.
That's 97, right?
Was it?
Yes.
Was it 97 or 98?
97. 98 was Final Fantasy VIII, which was a $40 to $45 million budget.
Which is nuts.
Yeah. That's not an insignificant amount of money to spend on a game, which is actually more than they even went on. So from that point forward, what they really considered a AAA game was 15 to 20 million. If you were in that range of money in your game development in the 5th generation, then you were considered a AAA. The Final Fantasy VII wasn't actually beat until 99 with Shenmue, which is bold because that was an experiment. There wasn't much like Shenmue at the time. There hasn't been much like Shenmue since. It's ambitious.
Aren't they doing a remake?
I think they're doing a third one is what they're doing. They've already done a remake. They're coming out with the third one, or the third one's already out, and I just didn't pay attention because
I think it might be a remake of the third one. It gets very confusing. I'm pretty sure the third one is out. I remember the third one, unfortunately, hearing it's disappointing.
Halo 3 was an example at a 30 million. I don't know the date of Halo 3, if anybody can tell me the date.
That would have been 2007, I believe. Because I remember that because I just started high school.
Well, look at that. That's 8 years after Shenmue, and it's still got less budget than it and Final Fantasy VII. That puts into perspective how much really went into Final Fantasy VII. But it's the 7th game in one of the most epic franchises in the history of gaming at that point. I don't know if it's still one of the most epic franchises in the history of gaming. There's some pretty epic ones. But when Final Fantasy VII came out, there was nothing that could stand beside the Final Fantasy franchise.
Absolutely true.
And let's throw in a more modern one where we're getting to now, which let's use Grand Theft Auto 5.
Could use Destiny too. I think Destiny still might be the highest budgeted modern game in the last couple of years.
I don't know what year GTA 5 was. Does anybody?
2013.
That was like 2014, I think.
Pseudo said 13.
Maybe 13.
I think, let me check. Yeah,
Sure.
13. September 17th, 2013, which is
Okay.
wild to me because I remember getting that and then getting it again because it comes out on PC a couple years later and then they just keep re-releasing it. It's almost an 8-year-old game.
Yeah. Yep.
That game is...
And it still runs like crap.
And they've spent around 265 million making it
and made
and
millions.
advertising it. And that's why it's still around, because they needed to make that money back. And it has.
It's made a shit ton of money. It's made over billions.
Destiny?
It's over $1 billion.
I'm not sure.
Destiny was $500 million. Yeah, it was a $500 million budget, which was a really big deal.
Yeah. Do you know the year on it? So I'd say if we're in the quadruple A era, Destiny 2 is a quadruple A. It's that far above. Especially in 2014. That's
Destiny 1 was 2014 and had a $500 million budget.
Jesus.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. Yeah, I don't know about Destiny 2. I don't know if they went that crazy with Destiny 2.
Well, it looked great, Destiny 2, for what it is.
There's a competent shooter hidden under a whole bunch of UX problems in that game.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
It seems like you can describe a lot of shooters kind of like that. It's a lot of ones that just throw a bunch of questionable UX decisions in there.
Yeah,
You
that's...
shoot things.
I mean, my experience with Destiny 2 was I had a lot of fun when I found the game. I had to find the game first. It was hidden somewhere within all the microtransactions and the purchases but it was in there. It wasn't bad. I had fun. Okay, so that's some significant growth you can see over those years. So let's just go. What's big 2020 AAA game? Let's grab a budget from one of them. Doom Eternal.
Is Doom Eternal AAA?
Yeah, I'm sure.
I feel like its budget is probably smaller than a lot of these.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah, Cyberpunk's a good one too.
That game's marketing was better than the game, unfortunately. Still love your Cyberpunk, but goddamn, what the hell was that?
Yeah, if you add in employees, Doom Eternal cost about 90 million.
I didn't think it was going to be very expensive. Like it's InSoft.
Yeah.
They don't have a ton of money.
I mean, they're not broke. That's for sure.
They're not broke, but it's not $500 million.
No, but it's also not that scale of a game like Destiny. And 90 million for a shooter, that's a good budget. That's a AAA budget. They're almost 100 million there. That's a lot of money.
Last of Us Part 2 was a $100 million budget. Or likely, at least. I don't know
Over
if it
budget?
released.
Or that was its budget.
I think it's speculated that was the budget. I don't think they've released that.
Yeah, all of
That's
these are
what people are
speculative. They never actually tell us how much money they spent. Cyberpunk, you said. Budget
Way too much.
313 million.
Damn.
I want to capitalize things. All right. That's a nice list. You can really see the growth there with the odd, like, massive spike outlier. You know, like Final Fantasy VII was arguably quadruple A. If you're going to call it quadruple A, there are spikes in triple A that you could cut off into a quadruple A category, maybe. We won't go there. That's outside of our scope. But I see some spikes to maybe justify that name. So, is a double A game. Anybody know? Anybody in chat have an opinion? How dare you have an opinion? It doesn't like my what is AAA game.
Too many A's. Probably wants an and. What is an AA game? One and game, please.
Yep.
I'd say Killing Floor 2 would be double A.
Yep. I would agree.
Yep.
Killing Floor 1 would be B or A.
Let's just
Yeah,
say
Killing Floor 1 is solidly a good indie title.
A really good mod. It went through all the transitions. Hopefully they'll have a triple A for Killing Floor 3. They should have the budget for it. Killing Floor 2 sold pretty well.
is it still indie? Killing Floor 2?
I don't think so.
It's still published by Tripwire, isn't it?
I don't know. I think they may have been acquired. I'll check.
Let's see. Tripwire Interactive.
All right.
Ooh, Chivalry 2 is coming. Ooh.
Yeah, it looks like it's self-published.
It is self-published. Okay. I guess we can have double A indies now.
Yeah, they're pretty typical. There's a lot of stuff like that.
That's just how far the tech has come. It's made it possible that an indie studio can achieve double A quality.
Yeah, or even AAA. I mean, technically, there's a lot of much larger studios that can make AAA games, such as Valve, and even technically Cyberpunk is still indie because it's owned by CD Projekt Red and published by them.
Very true.
I guess. I don't know if I'd consider CDPR indie anymore, though.
No, it's independent, but not like an indie studio, I would say.
Yeah.
It's one of those words that people get so used to independent studios being small, but now they're kind of larger, which is nice for like the AA, AAA title to apply rather than just kind of saying indie.
Well, there is a point.
Budget.
There is a point where you've gotten so big that you're no longer an indie studio. You're a large studio that owns multiple other studios, like CDPR does.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're indie anymore.
Investors and all
they're
that
a
stuff.
company. They big. They're becoming another Bethesda and Ubisoft.
Except better? Question mark.
Nah,
They were, and then
they were on that track, and then the roller coaster crested the hill.
we'll give them this year. We'll see how 2021 rolls out. I really wish they just did what Microsoft is, and I'm really glad that Microsoft delayed Halo for a year. Because that just seemed like the play. That seemed like the play, and it seemed really wild at the time. They're like, we're delaying it a year, and it's like, whoa. And especially because it's a big deal to not have a Halo game on release of a console, but it showed. And then you look at Cyberpunk's roadmap to like, this is what we're adding. It's like, okay, well, here's our roadmap to actually finishing the game, and it lines up with, next year. And it's like, okay, that probably would have been a good idea to delay it a year.
Yeah. Would Outlast be double A? I'd say it at least tries to be double A.
What their budget was, but 1.36 million. That's pretty high, but uncommon to see for even just indie titles.
We still haven't defined what a AA game is.
Yeah.
So a smaller budget specifically informs all of these things.
Yeah.
It's a smaller budget project that tries to be a AAA game.
Yeah. Tries to emulate AAA games. So it's... Hey, Needlac, welcome. Also, you got yourself a gift sub, courtesy of Art of Fighting. And we thanked him very much for you.
And typically AA will have a sizable publisher with them that's kind of providing that budget.
Yep.
It's usually that transition from your indie studio, and you say you make a good couple games, and then you get acquired, or you acquire a publisher who says, we're going to give you this money, and we're going to publish the games that you make, usually with, they'll have some creative control over what goes into it because it is their money, but not as much money as if it was a AAA studio, and they're just going to let you run wild with movie-like budgets.
Yeah. And that is often how a lot of AA's come around board. But yeah. Yep. Yeah, sure, but they didn't have the budget. Spot on, Rage. Spot on. But yeah,
nice thing about...
Sorry, but I was going to say the key is the attempt to emulate what current AAAs are. Is what it is. We're going to take a small budget and we're going to try to do what the big boys do. Right?
Yeah. I think like another example of this would be kind of like Insurgency games, and like Insurgency Sandstorm. It doesn't have a huge budget, but tries to take on the Call of Duty sized budget shooters and stuff like that. It doesn't have like campaign mode. They don't have all the budget for all that kind of stuff, but they have enough to make, a pretty high fidelity, smooth shooter experience.
Yeah. Polish is money. That's the game world.
Time is money.
Yep. Polish. Well, that's why polish is money, because polish takes time, and time is money. You have to pay people all the hours to do all the polish and to get a proper Goose Game. Yeah. Or just indie is what we usually call them. Because indie is where you get the people that, we're not going to put a ton of money into it, but we're going to do something wild and crazy that we love and have this wonderful idea that we want to donate and dedicate our time to making because we believe in it. That's where you get your innovation.
Another distinguishing thing between AA and A, like indie titles, is the kind of resources and support that comes with a publisher. If you're making an indie title, you're mostly just kind of be on your own for actually, creating and providing your assets, whether you're purchasing them or bringing them in-house. But if you have a publisher, typically the publisher will already have, teams in-house that can do that. So, not necessarily associated with your studio, but if you need like sound effects, Foley work, voice acting, music, assets, they have, either contracts that they've been working with teams before they can get you. They have those connections that kind of really help, move that game up from an indie look to that kind of AAA polished look while still kind of keeping it within a sensible budget.
And this is something you see in the credits for a lot of the games that we actually play here on this channel. Like Risk of Rain 2, for instance. The core team of devs for Risk of Rain 2 is actually like 5 people.
Yep.
But then there's a ton of people who contributed to the project through Gearbox, who is their publisher, and provided QA, provided assets, provided, just general getting the game into the market stuff.
Yep. Hey, here's what we need. Okay, here's what we can give you. Can you fill in the gaps? Go for it.
Yeah, because typically with a publisher, you'll be getting a few producers from them, and the producers are kind of the stuff that are going to make a lot of those things happen. And you'll find that when you go to make an indie game, there's a lot to it that you probably didn't notice right away. You're like, well, what am I going to do for QA? What am I going to do for, art and music? And you're kind of on your own to find those, either make it yourself, which, depending on what your timeline is and what your budget is, that can eat into that, as well as, if you have to pay someone, you still have to find someone within budget. And having, already those connections pre-made, maybe already deals already organized, or even just, someone to negotiate that for you can help you get close to like a AAA style without having to pay those AAA budget costs.
Yeah. So we're defined? Is that,
yeah, I think we've defined a AA game.
Okay.
They're starting to get a lot more common now in the Microsoft ecosystem, which I'm hoping that this is an actual trend that takes off. It seems to be maybe where Game Pass is going. So hopefully we see a resurgence in AA, because Microsoft has been buying up a lot of studios, and it doesn't seem like they're doing the typical thing when a publisher buys a studio, which is, they kind of heavy-handed take it over, decide, make all the decisions, kind of run it like they would run their own studio. And they seem to be kind of like, we're going to take you and we're going to give you the money for your games, and you're just going to make them the way that you kind of want to make them, and then we're going to put them on Game Pass, which hopefully works out well, because there's some pretty good studios that they've purchased over the years, and
And maybe they even butt in once in a while, like, hey guys, you need to release less buggy games that actually work, Bethesda.
Yeah, the Bethesda purchase is wild.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting because there was a massive acquisition.
Yeah, I was
for example,
shocked when that happened.
for like smaller titles, like AA would be Undead Labs, who make State of Decay and State of Decay 2. I think they're probably working on a State of Decay 3. But that's a very solid game, and it's a nice kind of transition where I'm pretty sure State of Decay 1 was an indie project, an indie title that got released, and it did fairly well, and then was acquired by Microsoft to be, a partnered Microsoft development studio, went on to make State of Decay 2 for Xbox and released on Game Pass, and has been doing fairly well there as well, I believe.
Right on. I haven't played the State of Decay series. I haven't
It's
seen
good.
it around.
The second one is co-op. I haven't played it. I have a lot of hours in the first one, just because it's like one of those, that indie budget with that indie price tag. I think it was only like $20 or $30, and it had pretty good. It was polished. It had that polished feel. There was still some jank to it, but it was well designed, well scoped. Took up a nice amount of time, and I was surprised. I really like zombie stuff, so that kind of bias pulls me through a lot of jank. But a lot of those games are actually pretty bad. And this one was, you can tell, was done by people who live, breathe, and eat that kind of genre. I mean, their whole studio is named Undead Labs. They're pretty focused. Yeah,
they definitely have a direction as a whole, as a studio. You can tell. Hey, Retro, welcome. So where do you want to go? Do we need a list of looking at what's been coming out? Since this is talking about the decline in the market, do we want to look at how many are actually coming out in the market today, or do we want to start with maybe look at why there was more before? Was there more before?
I think first we should probably give a short list of examples, and then from there we can move into like the reasons why they seem less prevalent in the market.
Sure. Yes, why they seem less prevalent. AA examples. This is chat's favorite part, where you guys throw out games and we put them down by year. AA games, go. Name them. Let's hear them. List them. Doom Eternal's not one. I have a couple down already. One from this year. I haven't played it yet, but I've watched a bit of it. Honestly, didn't interest me.
That's on the PS5, right? I think, or maybe
and
all
PC
systems,
and everything else. Hey, you should have stayed there. What you doing?
2021, 2020, 2021.
Going back.
Shit. I may have inhaled. Leave me alone. KF2 is my example. What's the year? State of Decay. What's the year? I need years too. I don't know when they came out.
State of Decay was that's the second one. The second one came out in 2018, and I think they were still that's when they were AA. I think State of Decay 1 would have been an indie title, which was still fantastic, and then they were acquired by Microsoft.
KF2 was 2016.
I have some 2018. That's good. 2018. Call of Cthulhu and Vampire. That's not how you spell Vampire. 2017. Hellblade.
Yeah, Hellblade. I think Hellblade is really like your stereotypical AA game.
Yeah. All right. Got the years in. See if you can fill it in some. I haven't seen the link spammed. Has the link's been spammed. You guys can jump in the document too. You're more than allowed to, help fill this out. If anyone was curious, I put a pic of Chrono Trigger cross stitch I'm doing. I am 100% curious in anything and everything Chrono Trigger. Telltale probably I'd consider indie. I also wouldn't consider it a triple A just because they're not actually trying to emulate the triple A. It would just be they're not going for that high fidelity graphical style.
A big thing you'll see with AAA is, bleeding edge technologies. The latest tech. You have like your ray tracing, you have your variable rate shading, you'll have all the latest graphical tech, as well as even processing tech and AI tech, all that kind of fun stuff. Because they have the budget for it. Like with AAA, you expect the best. We want the best, and AA is that kind of middle ground of, everything will be fine, everything's good, some interesting tech, but also just everything will have that polish that you would expect from what you used to expect from a AAA game. I don't know what's happened over the last like 5 to 10 years, but yeah.
Well, what happened is we had an extra long console generation, so nobody innovated.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. PC gaming.
Also, just standards dropped a fair bit too, for whatever reason.
Well, I think it's. But I mean, I think it's similar to the big map craze of the 2000s, where everybody wanted the biggest map and realized they don't have the content to make the big map. They just kept making big maps. Well, now it's, being able to do everything and interact with everything. We're going to need all these assets, but now they don't have the time and money to polish everything they're trying to make because they're just trying to go too wide again. Near a Tomato, AA or AAA?
I'd say probably closer to AA. I think they had less than a $20 million budget, which is still quite a bit, but compared to AAA budgets, that's probably on the higher end of AA.
Oh, don't Near Tomato. That sounds horrible. Oh, hold on, that hurt.
One that we were talking about earlier that hasn't been brought up yet is the Surge franchise.
I put it down, Surge 2, 2019.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
I totally missed that.
Insurgency, I think, was 2018. Insurgency Sandstorm. 2018, which is, I think, one of my favorite games. One of my favorite shooters, just for the way the weapons feel, and overall, it's very, very polished. It's very every time I play it, I'm like, man, I really love the Unreal Engine. This thing is solid.
Project Wingman, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Small team, like almost indie-sized AA. Is that 2020 or 2021?
That'd be.
I think 2020.
I don't think it's released. Isn't it early access?
No, it's out. It was out when I played it.
Yeah, then it'd be 2020.
Yep.
December 1st.
Great game. Go play Project Wingman. Super cheap, totally affordable. Tons of fun.
I forget that Humble is a publisher and they publish amazing games.
It's true. They do. They publish really amazing games.
Void Bastards is fantastic.
Yeah, played Void Bastards on stream too. Had a lot of fun with that one. If we're not a very big FPS fan, I had a lot of fun with that game.
I really
It's not very much FPS either.
I really just like innovative.
That's fair.
Games, even if it's not like an innovative game itself, even just like innovative styles, innovative tech, innovative, just approaches to everything is just nice to see, because we've been so dead for a while, because we kind of just lived in kind of open world hell, and then battle royale hell, and then whatever flavors are coming up too soon. I think it looks like we're going to go back to open world survival hell again for a bit. I still enjoy them, but I can still say that when a game gets very popular and sells very well, that's what everyone's board of directors is going to want. We want this game, and we're going to give you the budget for it, and only going to give you the budget if you make this game.
Yeah. And that's just, everybody wants money.
Yeah.
That's,
and it works, right?
Yeah, it's a fact, but we need those. We've gotten a few passion projects as we go, but the passion projects have just been similar spins on other. Oh, hey, there's a good 2020 AA, Mortal Shell.
Oh yeah, fantastic AA game.
Yeah. Strong recommendations for Mortal Shell. Yeah. No, Nier was not Kojima. Not enough peeing on people for Kojima.
It was developed by Platinum Games.
Yeah.
They make so many games that I love.
Yeah. even the games I don't like from them, I'm like, that's a really good game. I just don't like that, but that's a really good game. Yeah. Kojima. The last Kojima game I liked was Metal Gear Solid.
Well, I mean, technically, Metal Gear Revengeance or Metal Gear Rising was
That's not a Kojima game.
IP.
It's a Kojima IP. It's not a Kojima game. The big difference. At most, he looked at it and went, "You made what?"
You made a what now? And then he played it for a little bit and was like, "Okay, fine."
That's the only reaction I can see him having to it. He mixed up Platinum and Kojima
so
Productions.
good.
Yeah. That's a mix-up, but hey, mix-ups happen. I've mixed up some crazy things. So just by naming some off, we've got 3 2018, 3 2019, 3 2020. We're just evenly spread out through these 5-6 year gap we're thinking of, which is kind of cool. Kind of cool.
I mean, there are more titles if we go a bit further back, but let's focus on modern market.
Yeah. Since we're looking at the current decline, so let's get some more. We need more. We need more AA games.
I'm realizing that I don't play very many AA games.
You
It's either
don't-
full on indie or AAA.
Yeah, but you just don't play a lot of games in general, I find. You're very,
This is true.
very, very picky on what you play, which is appreciable.
It's good to
Not
play what you
necessarily
like.
a bad thing. Battle Chasers Night War.
Yep.
AA?
Nah,
That was
no.
2017.
No, I don't even think it's AA. It's not really trying to emulate anything AAA. It's not trying to do anything high fidelity. It's just its own little passion project.
It does kind of try to emulate like older AAA games, like the older Dragon Quests, for instance.
It's just trying to emulate old games.
Me.
Minecraft considered AA or indie? Indie.
It would be indie, and then now it's going to be AAA because it's Microsoft's baby.
Yeah.
They are going to milk that. Its own picture is going to be like first party.
Yeah, and that's why you saw such crazy innovation with it. The whole idea of this destructible world had been heard of, but not quite on that level. Never done quite like
Then
that.
it-
You can
then it
build
blew
anything
up.
as you go. What?
I wonder where Half-Life Alyx would fit. I don't know if they gave that a AAA budget or not, or if that would have been more of a AA budget. With the power of
I don't even think it can classify just because it's VR, and VR is in such a strange world of development that it's never going to get a true AAA budget because it's such a risk in a small market and so experimental.
I mean, eventually, right? Like,
Eventually, yeah, but right now it's just VR
then it-
games. And it is the AAA of VR still, I'd say.
yeah, I'd say like I guess Half-Life Alyx would probably be more on the AAA, one of the first AAA games for that system. Which means there's a lot of A and AA kind of that ecosystem. There's that new Medal of Honor, I think it was, that came out.
That was so bad.
I've been watching gameplay, and it actually isn't that bad. I think it's just one of those things where like expectations get set high because of price points, which is another big thing about AA versus AAA is you can kind of see the pricing differences between indie. Indies are usually like anywhere upwards from free to $20 to maybe $30. $30 would be pushing it for some indie games, whereas your AA studios are going to be going from like 25, 30 all the way up to like your 50, sometimes even 60 if they really want to compete with AAA. And then AAA you rarely ever see below that mandatory 60 USD kind of standard, because if you're making a AAA budget, why would you sell it for less than a AAA title price point?
Yeah, and that's a lot. That's a big budget in that game. Like, you're gonna have to sell it to a lot of people to make that money back at $60 a pop. You need a lot of sales.
And which brings up a whole other argument of that games are just too fucking expensive these days, and you don't need to spend that much to make a good video game. But I do have another one to add to the AA list: Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
Yeah, go ahead and add it.
I'll open up the
On
document
that note, I'm glad that people spend that much on games if they can actually make money with. I mean, yeah, crunch time on developers, BS, all this other stuff, BS, find better ways of managing your money, take less bonuses, stuff like this. Figure out your jank. But I want to keep playing games that had $500 million put into them to see what people can come up with. That's awesome. Not all going to be good. I'm not going to love them all, but I hope they keep doing it because, you get some crazy stuff.
We'll talk about it a bit more at the end, kind of talking about the future of AA, but it's something that people are finding right now too, is that you can't just sink a bunch of money into games and have it, turn out well. It's one of the kind of art forms they try to do with a lot of times with movies. They'll have a movie with a $300 or $500 million budget, and that has, it's got a better chance of being a better movie, especially quality wise, but that's not going to guarantee anything. And they're finding that, I think they're starting to realize now, I'll talk about this a bit more with kind of what Microsoft is doing, that, AA kind of seems to be that sweet spot where you find passionate indie studios, give them, more budget so they can, expand their creative freedoms a little bit more and not have to, worry too much about if they're going to be able to eat, and kind of let them create and let them see what happens. And I think that we're going to kind of maybe hit a bit of another renaissance with the newest consoles, especially if we start going more AA and a bit more, creative, rather than just saying, hey, what's the current flavor of the month? Can we just, throw a bunch of money at it and spit one out in 6 months as well?
Yep. Well, we see a trend going that way already, right? With, the Blizzard execs splitting off of ActiBliz and going, we're going to make our own little companies and make games that we want to make. And those are going to be AA's. Those are going to be AA games.
I can't wait. They've promised that they're making an RTS. I'm so excited.
Yeah, here's some new AA stuff coming from reputable names in the industry. I think it's wonderful. It's definitely what we need. You trace innovation back to the beginning of time in video games, and you always see it coming from the small studios. Always. Go ahead. I thought Sudo was trying to say something. I was
trying to breathe. I was just trying to breathe real quick in there to breathe air bubble or something. Like,
no, I'm not trying to talk
or something. Just trying to breathe. I'm like, what's happening?
It's called getting old. It's called getting old.
One I can add is to find they release like every year, so I'm just gonna dump it in like 2018. Is Earth Defense Force. Earth Defense Force is
EDF.
Been EDF is a solid AA.
EDF.
These games are so much fun. They're so ridiculous, but still so much fun. Something about shooting giant bugs is just
space
fun.
Bugs, and they're not bugs. Bugs don't exist in that universe.
They're just aliens.
Yeah, they're just giant
aliens.
They're giant aliens, and bugs don't exist in the EDF world. That's why in the game they always refer to them as aliens and never bugs.
I'm probably thinking of Starship Troopers because I absolutely love that movie as well.
I love Starship Troopers as well. One of my favorites. But let's not get onto that rant because let's try to stay on topic for a change. We've done okay. So, is there a decrease?
Let's talk about this a bit.
Yeah.
And I think it has something to do with just how many video games are made these days.
Let's take a quick poll. Sorry. Hey, Incaria, welcome. So, Incaria, question, and everybody else, question. Do you think there's less AA games today than there used to be? That is the question. Before we all get on a rant, I want to hear what you have to say. Opinions. More AA, less AAA, says Incaria. Indie games are so good. I agree with you, but that's not what I asked.
I'd say when we get to, I guess we'll get to the chat, but for AA wise, I think PS2 was like a peak era for that. That the second party developer really kind of, and those studios were really big back then. And a lot of them didn't have, AAA, because AAA studio budgets were typically reserved for their first party games. And you'd see that in, the actual games made by Sony. But that's kind of where AA was really kind of shining, was, okay, well, we're going to give this studio, money to make for, our systems, given the dev kits. They have a bit of a budget, not a huge lot of stuff, but there was a lot of games that were pumped up back then. A lot of bad games, but there was also a lot of good games because there was a lot of creative differences being kind of put out there and a lot of unique ideas being explored, especially as tech improved.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, the PS2 is also the library with more garbage and jank on it than any library in the history of games. So it also lended itself to that.
Yeah. but it was that genre, like that generation, like the PS2 360 generation. There was a huge resurgence of those AA studios, because indie wasn't, you couldn't penetrate the console market as an indie studio because it's just way too expensive to afford those dev kits and those dev licenses, as well as just be able to make games of those quality, because we didn't really have like 1 to 2 hour games were pretty rare until we started getting the web store, like the Xbox Live Marketplace, and being able to buy them digitally without having to, that was a big thing about indie versus for AA back then, is AA still had the budget for publishers to print discs and ship discs to stores and handle all that, rather than having to do it yourself. And then with the surgence of digital downloading, all of a sudden those costs would go way down and you can save a lot more room in your budget.
That's a really interesting point that you bring up, that the digital download enables you to sell a game for less than the cost of a medium.
There's a lot of logistics that go into that, and it's another thing that like developers typically don't actually make that much money off game sale. If you break everything down, like they'll make money, but if you break down percentage wise, like publisher will take a lot, and you break down like the publisher costs and the budget of it, a sizable amount of it would go to marketing, would then go to printing the actual disc, as well as fees, because the store is selling it. If you're going to like GameStop, EB Games, Walmart, Amazon, wherever your game is being sold, they need to make money off it, because that's the point of them selling it for you. So they'll take a cut, all that kind of fun stuff, and it kind of small as that gap of profit. And if you're a publisher, you're giving them the money. You're making the money to make the game. You're getting paid as it goes, and your budget's used for that. And then the profits will typically go to the people who invested the money into it.
Yeah,
which I think is a really important point, and very much rightly made, is the technology that we have available to us now. Like, it gives us the ability to distribute games in a much quicker, easier manner, and has really allowed the indie market to take off. Because as Sudo mentioned before, like the Xbox Live Arcade, there wasn't really a way for indie games to distribute. You couldn't really get them out there without the help of a publisher.
Steam has done some wonderful things for the community.
Yeah, a lot of those, like a lot of publishers now, not publishers, but like store providers. As much as I don't always agree with what Epic Games is doing, I do really still appreciate them, producing and helping cultivate a lot of these indie titles. Giving them the budgets they need, and I don't always like exclusives, but I do like that they're actually helping these games get made in a decent quality and making sure that they're good without influencing them too much. They've kind of allowed them to still do what they want, as long as it's just on their store, which is, it's fine. Sucks for some people who want to make that choice, but that's just what happens sometimes. But I still really like what they've been doing in regards to the game world and game quality in general.
That's what Curse of the Elder Gods was, right? And that's one of their exclusives, indie titles that they're pumping. I think it's only there.
Maybe.
Anyway, I'm probably going to be playing that a little later.
Yeah, and it's something that we'll be seeing too. But at least from what I've seen for AA, it was all very common in console world, like the console world from or even like earlier, like PlayStation, even like NES and SNES days. It was very expensive to get in there, but you could still have smaller teams that would group together, somehow get their hands on a dev kit, sometimes even hack it, and then go to Nintendo saying, "Hey, look what we made," which is actually kind of how I think Rare got started. Rare originally made it for the Spectrum computer. They were making games, and they did fairly well, and they knew that things were going to go to console, and like computer gaming was going to die for a bit, because the console's dedicated hardware, you can't compete with it. And I don't think they had an official dev kit. I think they just like hacked again, like they hacked a cartridge together, and then went to Nintendo and demoed it. And Nintendo was like, "Holy, like we love this," signed them on, gave them a budget. But they kind of started off at that like AA. They had a bunch of money from before. They were kind of independent, but had enough money to make something, and then got acquired. But that was still common back then, where you would have teams that would, take that bit of a risk without having the full publisher behind you to, secure a bunch of stuff for you. But you're also not just a small team with a small budget, because the cost of entry is insane, as well as printing. And anything about that is, back then what would happen is, when your game was finished, everyone in the company would typically go and start printing the discs. Everyone would be making the discs, making the labels, putting them into cartridges, getting them ready for shipping, and everyone would contribute to getting the game out there. Because if you're single A to AA, you don't have it on hand distribution network set up, right? You don't have those connections, and it's expensive.
Yep. Even burning the discs is expensive and time consuming.
Yeah, and then
I've worked with the big multi-tray burners and stuff where we're burning like 30 or 40 discs at a time. Even with that quantity, it's work. It's work.
Yeah, and then through 360 onward, I think we started seeing more of like the AA studios that do well. Typically, what you would see would happen is the publishers or the big names would see this and like, oh, this company is doing well, and they would buy them, and then they would kind of take them over and be a little bit more overhanded because they're like, okay, well, you know, they're good, but we know how to make games properly, and these are things you'd see. And a lot of like big name publishers, even like Sony, Microsoft, smaller things like EA was doing this for a while, where they'd buy studios and you know, get pretty involved in the development process. It's just, and I'm trying to think of a few other studios that were, or publishers that would have been. I think Ubisoft is at fault for like, it's just kind of what the system was, and it made sense on a business standard too. Like, why would you spend all this money and acquire something if you weren't going to, you know, be the influence and run it, right? Why would you just let them run on their own? Which is where we kind of saw a fall off of AA, because AA would kind of mostly go into AAA pretty fast, or either just be indie, as well as it was still kind of hard to penetrate that market and compete, because you had a higher budget, which means that you have a higher risk and you need to make a lot of money, but you're just so difficult to compete marketing wise with the AAA games as well as their quality. And you're still competing for, let's say, you know, the average person buys, you know, a couple games a year, or a couple, you know, full price games. For us in Canada, you're looking at about $80. So at least for me personally, I'll probably only buy like 3 or 4 $80 games a year. Depending on the year, of course. If it's a really good year, I'll probably splurge. But, you know, if you're competing with that, and if you're a AA studio releasing on consoles, you're going to be releasing at that full price. And for like the price per what you're getting, it's going to be really hard to compete with, say, you know, a Grand Theft Auto game or a Rockstar game versus, you know, something a bit less. I think maybe even Saints Row started as a AA, and they have a bit more of a success story. But if you just look at like feature parity and what the games can offer, you can tell that, you know, one's a lot more polished, and depending on what the budget is, you're probably going to go with, you know, with that. So I think we kind of saw a die off with that, but I'm really hoping with how the market is, especially with digital download and reduced costs in productions and shipping and logistics, that we can kind of have the middle budget specialized kind of games make a resurgence.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to, especially with what specifically Sony is doing with their hardware. Like, you've got access to the new DualSense controller, which is mind-blowingly cool. Like the way that they've handled haptic feedback in it, and the different touch points are just all so high quality that I think that's going to attract a lot of indie developers going, hey, you know, if we can get a little bit more budget, if we can find a way to get a little bit of publisher money, maybe from Sony, maybe from somebody else, then we can really include, you know, the new functionalities that are available in this controller, like the pressure sensitive triggers, like super, super cool. And I'm really looking forward to the bits of innovation that we can see based on, you know, Sony's new controller, the new SSD capable consoles, stuff like that. Ray tracing being available on both sides of the proverbial fence. I'm really looking forward to some of the innovation that we'll see on the AA scale and the indie scale.
Yeah, AA is going some really interesting places, and even just looking at like 2020's AA's that we've listed here, like Mortal Shell and Project Wingman.
Oh, Mortal Shell is so good.
State of Decay 2, like these are easily a AAA game polish and quality in most years.
Yeah, and Gary, most VR games I'd say right now would be AA. A bunch of them are kind of indie tech demos, but we're starting to see kind of the AA releases, and probably pretty soon, depending on how those do, we'll start seeing AAA once, you know, the market share for VR titles goes up, or VR systems. I think it's starting to get pretty high. For a long time, it was only like 1 to 4% of the gaming market had a VR headset, because, you know, they were
brand new, super costly.
They cost like you need like alone, like the system itself costs like over $1,000, and then you need a computer that probably costs around $1,000 as well to be able to run it. And chances are, like, you're not gonna, you know, budget out a computer to save your money to buy VR. Chances are that money's gonna go to your computer first. Mm-hmm. because VR also takes quite a bit to run. But as things go forward, like the Quest, I think can run from itself, and a lot of titles are kind of getting optimized for it. Like Beat Saber can run, I think, independently of a computer, just in the hardware that's in the Quest itself, which is kind of cool. We'll start seeing a bit more for that, but with the AAA budgets, like there hasn't been a need for it because there hasn't been a market, because they'll never make that money back. Half-Life Alyx would be more like a AA. The new Medal of Honor would be a AA. I'm hoping we see like a AA version of Gorn. To see like a fully flushed out version.
I will
of that.
buy an HMD for that.
I'm hoping they add it, but can you imagine like that with like multiplayer? Because we're almost going to get to the point where more people will have headsets, and right now what kind of happens is like when you have a headset, you'll find that chances are you'll maybe have one or two friends that also have a headset, but maybe don't have the room to actually play full motion games as well. A lot of the time when people get headsets, they're kind of they don't always have the room to play the full motion games, or kind of be locked to either the seating versions or kind of standing still. But as tech progresses, it'd be cool. We have more people will have them, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing more focus on more games. You'll see this huge budget. It'd be amazing to see what $300 million could do in the VR space, and just to completely expand that tech. Maybe solve the locomotion issues, maybe solve just kinetics in general, just moving and just actual processing and tech and lighting. And it'd be amazing to see ray tracing in VR. That'd be kind of interesting if they could ever pull that off.
You need upscaling, otherwise you're gonna puke.
The thing to remember with AAA and VR in Caria is that AAA is all about budget, and budget follows success. Success doesn't follow budget. So they need to have popular, well-accepted, well-adopted VR games that people are playing and into and looking forward to before they can do the AAA budget. And then there's just nothing like that. Like if you think of that in the VR scene right now, there's not a single game. Nothing fills that criteria. So we're not going to see AAA yet.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of games that are very much highly polished indie titles, but mostly it's just tech demos because nobody has a headset.
I think it's like, and this is a lot too. This is like getting very popular, but I think it's still 2% of Steam users have a headset. And then when you think about, if you're going for a big budget, marketing and business decisions, you have to make your pitch, and you have to say, this is how we're going to sell. This is how we're going to make your money back. Because if you're asking someone for, a bunch of money, they're going to be like, well, how am I going to get my money back plus more? And if you're saying, well, we're going to sell it to 2% of the total market, they're going to be like, well, why don't I just give you this money to sell to, 100% of the market, kind of an idea. So until that market growth goes up, we're not going to see those big budgets yet, until, the newer generation of HMDs is out and the price starts coming down. I think if we can get a decent headset that sells for like $250 or $300, I think we could really kind of get it out there, and one that doesn't require a very supercomputer one, which with the way that prices of kind of going for older computers, at least hopefully we're starting to kind of get there, where if you have like a 1660 or get your hands on like a 5700 XT, or even like the older generation cards can still run VR very well.
Maybe now is not the best example of the costs going down, because the 5700 XT is like $1,500 right now.
I'm almost just saying, like, if they bought them around that era, because like I got mine for like around 5. So I'm saying that like if people have these graphics cards, they still have the ability to now still purchase a VR headset. Maybe that's something they're looking into, saying, well, I don't want to buy a new GPU because this is stupid, but VR headsets, they're still reasonable in price, and they say, well, my current thing can still run it. I now have a whole new genre of games to play, rather than hoping to get a new generation GPU to play these new flashy, shiny titles that aren't really that necessary.
Play Sirento. If you have a VR, play Sirento and Gorn.
I really want to play Sirento. I want to play it so bad.
I don't think any AA use ray tracing yet. But it's mostly going to be a AAA thing, because it's pretty bleeding edge tech. And I wouldn't even say that like ray tracing is here yet, because you need to do a lot of special stuff to even have it actually run well.
It's not ray tracing is not a gimmick.
It's not
ray tracing is
it's the future.
100% the future. But the thing is, the application of ray tracing, the way it is right now, is very expensive to do. It requires a lot of developer time. it requires a lot of optimization for specific hardware because AMD's and NVIDIA's implementations are both very different. But it's starting to be in a place where a AA budget can try to use it, as there are new standards coming out like Vulkan ray tracing and DXVR.
Vulkan might actually get those frames back up on the ray tracing. Yes. Oh, Vulkan. I'm done.
I'm trying to remember. I think Unreal Engine 4. I'm not sure if it's like a preview build or not, has ray tracing support, but it's not to the level where, like, when you're seeing ray tracing in, you know, AAA titles today, those are very, very heavily kind of customized engines. There's a lot of tech that still needs to go into that. And like ray tracing itself isn't new. Ray tracing is, you know, what is used to render, you know, 3D graphics. Usually, if you're watching like a 3D animation, or if you're using like Blender, Cycles, Renderer, or, you know, Red Octane or something, those are ray tracers. And you'll see that, you know, they take days to render frames. And if you're playing games,
look great though.
You typically need to render a frame in like 16 milliseconds and stuff like that. So it's kind of like we're getting to the point where, you know, they're figuring out hardware that, you know, can accelerate the performance. Or we're figuring out, you know, tips and tricks of like, hey, we can do ray tracing because we don't have to do 100% ray tracing. We can figure out, you know, where on the screen we'll need to ray trace, and we can ray trace that and, you know, mix in some rasterization where it won't matter because, you know, that, like, if you can ray trace only half the screen, you know, you're already saving like 50% of your performance.
I wonder if AI generated lookup tables and stuff can help with it too.
Well, that's effectively what DLSS is.
Yeah, they're using it for a few different things, but DLSS is, yeah. Well, you know, it's AI run, not AI pre-generated. Lookup table would be pre-generated. That's
it's pre-generated.
Is it pre-generated?
That's why it's only in certain games.
Yeah,
if it was generating live, it would be
realize
driver level, and
DLSS
you wouldn't need any pre-generated stuff. It would just run at a driver level and upscale as it goes.
I misunderstood. I thought DLSS was a global technology. I didn't realize it was a per-game application.
They're working on it. They're saying that eventually DLSS 3.0 will be something that'll be, if a game supports anti-aliasing, they'll say they'll be able to do 3.0, but that's probably very far off. But yeah, it's kind of neat side tangent on how DLSS actually works is they're basically just training those. It's on a per game basis, and the way they do is they render the game basically out at a very, very high resolution, and they start training that AI on it by feeding it, you know, the smaller resolution. And it's a very, not easy way, but for making those neural nets, if you have, you know, a perfect example of what's there, give me a second, someone's at the door. You can kind of lower resolution render something and then kind of match it to that one and keep running it through the system until it kind of upgrades until it's there. Just give me a second.
Cool. Yeah, you go take care of your door. Look, even I'm learning stuff. But I wanted to touch on RTRT for a moment real quick, since that was a topic, and I think a lot of people don't really understand what ray tracing is. They just use the buzz term ray tracing. Like there was a large number of people that thought ray tracing was a NVIDIA proprietary technology. And it's
absolutely not true.
Yeah, no, it's not true at all. That's not what it is. Ray tracing is an ancient technology that we've been using forever to generate 3D scenes, where you trace the rays of the light to see where it bounces off to create all those reflective surfaces and stuff. And that's when, you know, like you watch the really, really, really high-end graphics in movies like Avatar, where they were talking about like a single frame in Avatar took 24 hours to render. That's all the ray tracing that's going on. They're tracing the path.
Have the hardware to accelerate that, and now we're starting to.
Yep. Deus Rays. So yeah, the RTRT is basically us saying, okay, well, let's take that movie quality 3D rendering and try to do it in real time. So we can do one frame from 24 hours down to one frame in 16 milliseconds.
And real time is also a misnomer. Almost nothing in computing actually happens in real time, but it's roughly equivalent to real time.
It's happening fast enough that it feels like real time to us because our brain can't process the ticks between what it's doing.
Yeah.
Basically what it is. It's like
real-time computing is a whole other field, and it's insanely complicated and requires all sorts of special hardware.
Yeah, remember when you're playing your games, it's like watching a flip book, right? It's literally like a bunch of drawn things getting flipped through. It's just all those drawings that it's flipping are being generated right before. So imagine somebody that can draw an image every 13 milliseconds, just drawing and flipping them past your eyes. Is literally what's happening. It's not quite real time, but it feels like it. So it's 16 millisecond ray tracing is what we're targeting here. That's what it really is. And everybody implements it differently.
Everybody implements it differently using a couple of different APIs built for different hardware, which is very complicated.
And currently there are a handful of games that support RTRT. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Sounds about right. Although Resident Evil Village is going to be optimized for AMD's ray tracing hardware, which is going to be very interesting because, and we are way off topic now.
Oh yeah.
But it's a different approach to doing ray tracing, and the way that AMD has set it up is it's very good at things that NVIDIA's system is not very good at, and NVIDIA's system is very good at things that AMD's system is not very good at. So it'll be very interesting to see how it performs between the two vendors' hardware.
Yeah. I saw it on Minecraft, but it was just like a regular shadow. It literally is a regular shadow because we're projecting light rays and bouncing them off of things and absorbing them into things so that the shadows appear as natural as possible. And natural lighting and natural shadows is one of the greatest things towards realism in a game. You look at Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. That's what lighting can do. I mean, there's higher res textures and whatnot, but the environments, that's lighting. It makes it all feel real. Welcome back. I'm glad you weren't killed by the person at the door.
No, they want me to join next door. Because, you gotta do those neighborly things, right? Very weird. What did I miss?
Very weird indeed. We just ranted about real-time ray tracing.
Yeah.
The whole time you were gone.
Yeah. We literally were still talking about RTRT when you came back. We were just kind of explaining what it is and how the misnomers work and fun stuff like that. So it seems like the general consensus from most of the chat is that AA games are about where they used to be. The same number. So that's what people were saying when we asked.
So it's not necessarily a decline in the market. It's more just that there's a ton more indie games and a ton more AAA games. Yeah.
I think their actual raw number, personally, is pretty close. There's still a lot of them. There's a ton of AA games out there. I don't see them ever going away. AA games budgets have been going up just because the gaming industry as a whole is growing substantially by billions of dollars. I mean, even indie games get budgets nowadays. A glut in the market.
Yeah, I'd say maybe AA kind of had it's still like not hidden, but it's one of those things where like it's consistent. You just didn't see it as much, and you kind of look back on it, you kind of notice it, but definitely gets overshrouded by the marketing of AAA games and overshrouded by the hype of indie games, because indie games, that's kind of what they rely on for their marketing, is the hype of their games.
And well, people, also innovation creates hype, right? That's sort of their thing. The indies, where the innovation happens, and that's what people are going to be hyping and talking about. And people watch the indie scene because that's where you find the most unique stuff, like Loop Hero, which got boring quickly, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the AA becomes a sweet spot again, because I think that's like the perfect kind of balance between, a studio having enough budget to, eat and get paid well and, get what they deserve for the effort they're putting into, but not having to give up all their kind of creative controls, and they can still kind of, you know, make fun decisions and, you know, do fun things. And I'm really hoping, because like we were saying for a while, what the kind of trend was in the the early 2010s to now was, you know, these AA studios would get bought out and kind of absorbed into larger corporations and corporation structures, and, you know, made to make games their way. And what people are finding now, or at least the big studios are kind of finding, especially Amazon, who has failed a few games, is you can't just throw a bunch of money and create a studio and have it be successful. Culture is very important, and you can't buy that. That needs to, you know, kind of arise organically. You need to have, you know, passion. You need to have passionate people who, you know, care about working on the product, and you kind of have to let them do their thing. And, you know, you kind of have to trust people in some sense. You know, you can make sure things are going to, you know, get done in a timely manner, and, you know, things make sense. But, you know, it's nice not to have the, hey, we're going to take our way of making games and force you upon it, and then when it fails, we're going to blame you and not think that it was our fault.
Yeah, I see it as very analogous to the music world, honestly, at that point, where you've got your not overproduced, overproduced is the term we like to throw around, but a very highly produced music where it's, you know, form and parcel and cut and designed in order to appeal to people, and it's going to do probably about as well as you think it's going to do because you've done all the projection and the work on it. And then you've got the artistic side where you've got just some people that are passionate about what they're making, and the sky's the limit with it. You get innovation and creativity from that side.
And the AA market, which is, fingers crossed, coming back, it's hopefully is growing again, sort of meeting that middle point. Like Pseudo called out, like these developers, these creative people, these game designers will be able to make projects that they're passionate about, that they really care about the outcome of, and still also be able to buy food.
Because eating is important. Indie devs, take note, eat food.
Yeah, pay attention to Valheim. You need that food for your stamina.
Yeah.
But can compete with AAA? No, they'll never compete with AAA because, as Pseudo pointed out, they're overshadowed by the marketing budgets. Like, we're, you know, with a AAA game's marketing budget is probably close to the budget of a AA game entirely.
So this is something where we can start talking about the future of AA, because this is where something I'm thinking is going to be a bit different now with how stores are kind of moving. Because previously, you know, when you have your marketplace or your Storm or Steam, you would see like the difference between an indie launch, the difference between a AA launch, the difference between a AAA launch. When a AAA game launches, you know, you go to the homepage of Steam, and that is the game. The game is everywhere you look. Everything, you know, they'll have YouTube videos up for release, and then when the actual launch, you know, the whole store changes to support that game and put it in your face, and you're aware of it. But now, a lot of games aren't being purchased the traditional way. We're kind of seeing the same thing before, where I was saying how when online marketplace kind of became a thing, you started seeing, you know, another section just for indie titles. You know, you could browse just indie, and that was a way to, you know, kind of have free exposure and have free marketing. We saw huge purchasing amounts for indie titles, and, you know, AA kind of fell in between of, you know, they're not indie, so they wouldn't show up there, and they had to compete with the AAA people, but, you know, there's no way they're going to compete with that kind of marketing. But I think now with where Game Pass and EA Play and whatever the Ubisoft one is called, I think we're getting to a point now where, you know, AA studios owned by these publishers that are releasing on their stores will now have, you know, better exposure, because they've already paid for the service, they can see it, and, you know, that's what, at least from what I see from Microsoft, that's what they're trying to do. They want to have, they don't want to fill the library with, you know, subpar games that, you know, just to say, hey, we have so many games, but now you have to, like, you know, sift through all this stuff to find good stuff. They're trying to find, at least from what I'm seeing, a bunch of really solid AA studios, giving them sizable budget to make really nice games, and then having them on their store where they don't have to sell for AAA budgets. They can just get played, which I think we might see a huge resurgence in it, especially if it's like a pay-per-play model under the hood of, you know, how many hours people have been playing the game is how much of the kind of Game Pass share of the revenue that you'll get. And then you don't have to worry about marketing, because, you know, all the games are there. It can just go by, you know, what's there, what's getting shown. They can have, you know, what PlayStation does is they have, you know, games of the month, and a bunch of those will typically kind of not be AAA games, because AAA games aren't going to be available for free or for discounts for a long time. They'll be the AA games just / indie. And we'll kind of be getting a lot more of that kind of exposure or cheaper marketing without having to drop millions into marketing alone. So I'm really hoping that the way that goes, we'll see this kind of massive improvement of maybe instead of putting $300 to $500 million into one project, they can split it and do $30 to $50 million into 5 projects, which would be, very, very interesting to see how all those different titles develop.
Yeah. So
yeah, and it's
go ahead.
go ahead. Liz. Okay, I'll go ahead then. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how those sort of passion projects work out, specifically in the context of game services, where you're paying to access a large curated library of games. So, and because their revenue is basically guaranteed. At that point, you don't need to worry about making the money back. It becomes a lot easier to say, okay, well, we're going to get this much revenue. We can tell whether or not this project is going to work based on, stream time or whatever. Then we can afford to take more of a risk, develop a more innovative game, develop a newer, process for doing things, and allow a lot more of that creativity to shine through with that sort of mid-market budget, which will be fantastic.
So what we're looking at here then is an increase in marketability for mid-market games without an increase in cost in the marketability, allowing the growth of the AA games.
Yeah. Exactly.
And another thing to that too, as we're talking about earlier, is, before the AA games would still have AAA prices. Because that's one thing that an indie studio can do is they've had less overhead costs overall, that they can sell the game for cheaper. AA still need to typically sell at a AAA price, and it's hard to compete on that. But now, that price is already included, and you're going to have just a library of AA games mixed with AAA games, and it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe people will, they don't have to pay for it. They've already paid their like $10 a month, and they just get to play the games they want to play. And I think it's one of those things back before. I know I was like this too. Is if you only had so much money to spend, you're going to want to, get the new shiny game and then play it for a bit. Maybe it's not as good as you thought, but it made sense to get that, right? It's something that in general our society is, spend more, get more is just kind of ingrained into us. But now, you just have a library of games to play. It doesn't matter if it's an indie, a AAA, or a AA. It's just what games do you want to play? And I'm really hoping to see that, these AA games start seeing a huge surge in playtime, because, they are solid games that have a lot of innovative and a lot more kind of cliche audiences. And cliche doesn't always mean small. It just means a subsection, and there's lots of subsection in the overall market, and there's a lot of room for that. So like State of Decay 2 has a pretty big following for it, because people love zombie games, and I'd say it's probably one of the best kind of survival zombie games that's been made. And everything else from the Surge, you can get all this other stuff that all just in your library at once. You don't have to worry about well, I want to get the most bang for my buck. You already have all the titles. You just get to focus on what you actually want to play and what you actually enjoy.
I'm glad you touched on the notion that's really ingrained into us, where you get more, you pay more, you get more, because it's really not true in video games. Like really, really not true. Especially when I looked over, there was a great analysis tool that looked over your Steam library, looked at how much you paid for every game, because that's all recorded in a history. It knows how much you paid for them all and how many hours you put into them, and breaks it down how many hours of entertainment you got per dollar. And all of the top ones on my list,
so bad.
all of the top ones on my list are all indies. The entertainment per dollar are always the little games, like RimWorld is one. I think I have like 350 hours in a $20 game, $30 game.
Factorio.
Yeah, Factorio. Like a lot of these games, I looked at them at first, I was like, $30 for a little indie game? No, it was worth it.
Then you play it for 200 hours and go, wow, I got a lot of value out of that.
Yeah.
I got Valheim for $20. I'm coming up on 200 hours of that.
Yeah, there you go. 200 hours for $20. That's 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of money. How long would you need to play Cyberpunk to get the same value?
Yeah, I was hoping to be able to play it that much. I still put a fair amount into that, and still it's like that $80 price point. I've definitely gotten more about it. And the nice thing is, say if it was a Game Pass service that Cyberpunk was on, and I just got to choose, chances are I probably would have just started playing more of the AA titles, because that's just the games I want to play, right?
Yep.
With the AAA releases, you pay full price and you play them because it's the new shiny thing. But if it's just library, it's going to force AAA titles to also kind of compete on being innovative and being different, because now if you before you would have to compete, they'd all basically make the same game, and then they compete on who could market it better and get people to buy theirs first, because they're only going to buy one of the five. Let's say if 5 studios all make a similar game, well, who's going to get it? But now if all those 5 games are in the same service already purchased, and the way that they get paid is by who's playing it the most, now you have to actually make your game fun,
good,
and different, and engaging.
That's an interesting point, and it does make me happy that a game's success will be more about how many people play it and less about how many people buy it. Because people are always going like, it sold all these copies, it has to be the best game. Yeah, Spice Girls sold millions of albums too, and they're not the best musicians.
And that's another thing too, that like I'm still like, there's can still be some caveats and still some like monkey paw kind of gotchas that can happen with this now with game design, where if people are competing on playtime, while there's an unfortunate side of things where if you're going to study, well, how do we make people play it the most? It's like, well, we might see a surgence in games that are designed to be addictive, which wouldn't be great.
Yeah,
and another
MMOs.
fallback to and then another fallback,
specifically Korean MMOs.
People put just as many hours into Western MMOs.
Nope.
They
WoW
have
specifically, sure. Everything else, no.
I played Rift and WildStar as much as I played WoW while they were alive. Yeah,
But they're not, though.
like when an MMO comes out, I take a week off work, just for the launch, just so I can get my leveling and stuff done. Like we organize groups and like schedule time. Like we set alarm clocks to wake up on time to meet up with our groups so we can level together.
I think the difference is that it's a smaller group of people doing that for Western RPGs. And for Korean MMOs, there's a lot of kind of casual people that are playing it that much for the grind.
That's true. The grind is very casual.
Like Genshin Impact. I know like there's a lot of people I didn't even know played video games that all over my social media are just, all they do is play and talk about it. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. I didn't see that coming. But as I was saying, and the unfortunate thing I think of if they start competing on playtime is you might start seeing a bit more of that predatory, well, how can we make our game addictive? How can we suck them in and, make them play all the time? Like, oh, if you don't log in daily, your progress is going to start to suffer. You're going to start having issues, and we're starting, some of those kind of anti-fun mechanics. Or another issue with it is if it's not being sold and people still want to make their budgets back, is you might start seeing another huge resurgence in microtransactions. Hopefully just cosmetics, but you never know, right? If they're still trying to compete in that and then know they're not going to get those play numbers, or well, we can make our money back on that small subset of people who will just spend a lot in microtransactions.
I mean, that's going to happen to some games, but there will also be the games that go that route and just die because of it. And developers will hopefully learn one day, but that's what happened to Rift. Rift ended up going pay to win in its microtransactions and letting you buy raid drops and stuff like that before the raid was even out, and the entire serious community that played it every day just went, we're done.
It'd be really interesting, like, experiment to see, like, even just from like an MMO standpoint, can you imagine like back when there was a bunch of them competing, if it was one fee you paid, so you're paying $20 a month, but then you get access to all the MMOs and you just choose which one you want to play. Like that would be that's kind of where the area we're going now too with the competition. We're like, well, you have access to them all. Now it comes down to which one do you actually want to play, rather than which one's marketing hooked you in first, and now you're not going to buy all of them. You're only going to buy one of them, but whichever one you bought first is the one you're probably going to stick with. But it'll be really interesting to see, especially with games competing in that sense of like playtime, or hopefully there's enough room for people to play a variety of games. We don't have to go back to, because what we kind of see nowadays, especially with games getting super expensive, is people only have the budget to really kind of buy one game, and they're going to buy the game that all their friends have bought already, because that's kind of what they want to do, is play with their friends. And that kind of cut off, for the longest time, people were saying, oh, is single player dead? Is a single player game dead? Because it was harder for them to make their money, especially competing with the multiplayer games, because the thing that multiplayer games provided was the ability to socialize and spend time with your friends, which is invaluable to a lot of people, especially with like how things are nowadays. But I think that this model of playing able to play anything, hopefully we see another resurgence of single player games, because time in between you still want to play something. You don't have to worry about oh, do I want to buy the new Call of Duty for $90, or do I want to buy a few single player games? And if all your friends have Call of Duty and they want you to play, you're going to be more influence to make that decision. But now if it's just a service you have and you have access to that and other games, it'd be nice to be able to, have the library and have the, experiences that people can have just completely expanded.
Yeah.
Call of Duty was a bad example. Halo is probably a better example because Halo's actually going to be on Game Pass.
Call of Duty's a fine example. It still makes sense. You're not talking about Game Pass. You're just talking about game services as a general.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where what I'm going to say, because typically when the game would launch, you buy an Xbox, or what games are you going to buy? Well, obviously you're going to buy Halo. And now you don't have to worry about that because you can get Game Pass and
you should
continue with it.
If you have an Xbox and you don't have Game Pass, you're doing it wrong.
There are some, we like to talk about the positives of game subscriptions, game library subscriptions, I should say, a lot, because there are a lot of positives to it. But there are some caveats that I feel it is important to call out. For instance, if a game leaves a service, it's gone. You can never play it again.
Unless
any of the games that I have from the early 90s or the early 2000s, they probably wouldn't be on a streaming service. I would never get to play them again. If the service goes away, you lose access to all of those games. So
maybe the viewpoint should be that this is a great taster and sampler and tester, but if you play a game that you love, then go buy it and support the developers that much more.
Yeah, I'd love to see that model too, of just because that's kind of how things are working right now. But you'll still see all the Game Pass games on Steam, and it's kind of one of those things of the only real reason you'd buy it is so that you can have it on Steam. And for the most part, when you own these games, you still have to launch it through the Microsoft Store anyways. But yeah, that's a good point of if you buy it, you own it, and they can't just take it away from you. Whereas if it's on a service, for whatever reason, say licensing or something happens, they can remove it, and then now you don't have access to it.
Yeah, you can actually buy the games that are in the Xbox Game Pass thing too. If you don't even have a subscription, you can go in and buy the games without trying them first. Or right now, I can just go and play them, and then if I want to keep it, buy it. But a lot of them are just going to stay there, so there's no point.
I wouldn't count on things staying on there forever, though.
I said a lot, not all. The stuff they own, the stuff Microsoft specifically owns, I see staying on there. That's the whole point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Their studios, definitely they will stay on Game Pass.
Yeah.
But say a studio gets acquired by somebody else and they have their own game library to subscribe to, say, a game studio that had been publishing games onto Game Pass was then acquired by EA, for instance. Mm-hmm. Well, EA isn't going to want their games on Game Pass. They're going to want their games on EA Play. So depending on how that deal goes down, how the digital rights have been handled through the Game Pass thing, they may just disappear. And if you ever want to play those games again, you have to go sub to EA Play.
And that's specifically why I said a lot, but not all. I know not all, but a lot of the games that are on Xbox Game Pass, at least right now, are Microsoft made or studios that they went out and bought specifically to put it on Game Pass. I don't think Yakuza's going anywhere anytime soon from it. You're probably going to be able to play Yakuza anytime you have that.
But licensing can be a big problem, especially as Nariel calls out in the music industry as well.
Yeah,
licensing can be a nightmare.
Yeah, and regions can be an issue as well. One thing I'm not too stoked on is everyone having a play service, and now if you want to play modern games, you're going to have to subscribe to 3 or 4 or 5 different services because they're going to really start pushing them. And what I see, unfortunately, what may be happening is games themselves can get very expensive, and they'll just be well, you can just get it on our service. You don't have to purchase it. But at least with those, they should stay for a while. But if you're looking at PC right now, if you want to play a lot of the more modern titles, you're probably looking at subscribing to Game Pass, subscribing to EA Play, and subscribing to Ubisoft Plus, I believe it's called. I think they might have changed the name recently. Which at first each individual one doesn't seem too much because they're around $10, but then all of a sudden you add them all together and you're looking at about $60 a month, and you're getting to the point where you're spending more now than you would have before. Sure, you have access to a lot more games, but
are you playing that many more?
Yeah, but are you really going to be able to have time for that, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how these companies compete with each other. It's nice to see at least EA Play integration with Steam, and as well as I think Game Pass integration to Steam is coming if it isn't already. Which might be kind of nice because then you can kind of go on a month-by-month basis. You can just buy a month and not worry about it. Get access to the games you want to play, then maybe buy a month of EA games you feel like playing for a month, and then buy a month of, some other studio for a month that you feel like playing.
Yep. Yeah, it could devolve down into, this game is coming out, I really want to check it out. I get that pass for a month. I play it. If I really like the game, I might buy it. If it's just okay, I could finish it and then not buy it because I've already beaten it and I'll never play it again. Like Final Fantasy 15, if I could have paid $1 to play the game for a month, I definitely would have been happy to just be like, I never need to play this again.
And it's a thing that like the current generation never really got to experience, and I think my generation was probably the tail end of that, which was renting games.
That's so close to my heart.
Yeah, like Blockbuster, Rogers Video for us, at least here, and I don't know what would have been like. That was very common back, and it goes back way back far. And that was like, I think it was like $5 or $7 a week. You could rent a game, and most games back then you could play a decent amount in that time. And we're kind of seeing that same kind of, at least for me, what would typically happen is that we would rent almost a game a week or a game every couple of weeks. So we were probably spending like $14 to $20 a month to have games to play without actually buying them. And it seems to be that kind of same market we're going back to now, where you're just paying that kind of monthly recurrence, but now you get to choose what kind of game you have to play. You don't have to buy the whole thing and have it and keep it. And then, I still have my PS2 games that I'm never probably ever going to play that I paid full price for. And then you go to trade them in for $2 at GameStop or EB. Because renting was the way to go before they got kind of wrecked. And it's nice to see that kind of come back, because it was a really good way to still kind of have that, competition of, well, what do I actually want to play? Because right now the price doesn't matter because they all cost the same. This whole row costs $7. This whole row costs $5. And what do I just want to play for a week? And, then I can return it, or I can rent it again. Or if I really like it, I can buy it, which is typically what happened.
Yep. That was a great way to do it. I miss rental. So we've talked about AA being about the same size and AAA growing a little bit,
and indie growing.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch a little bit on
exploding.
the indie side now for the last little bit, because the perception of the shrinking AA market is not just because the game market has grown and AAAs are so well advertised, as well as more AAAs than there used to be, just because there's more big companies, there's more people throwing their money into the game because it's a multi-billion-dollar business now. There's billions and billions and billions of dollars in games, and people want some of this money. So there's more of them, but the changes in technology have made developing a game with a small team so much easier to do that it's just been an explosion of indie that has flooded it. And the percentage of games available from AAA and AA compared to indie's percentage has just swelled. It has become the market.
With how engines are and the pricing of engines, anyone can make a game. I mean, anyone can download Unity or Unreal now, and you don't have to pay anything until your game's successful, which is huge.
Yeah.
And even just the way that those engines work and the technology behind it, before it still required quite a bit of knowledge and quite a bit of kind of customization, custom stuff. But nowadays, a lot of out-of-the-box experiences, you can really push an indie game far with just that. So that's going to just continue to grow huge.
Yep. I mean, to put it into perspective for some of the people that don't do the game development side, you talk to people that do game development, and they'll explain to you that it's easier to do a 3D game than a 2D game now, just because of the toolage that's been developed. If you want to make a 2D game for your first game, a lot of game devs and indie game designers and developers will tell you, make it in 3D with a fixed perspective. It'll play like a 2D game, it'll behave like a 2D game, but it'll just be easier to make, because the engines already do everything for you in 3D.
Which is an interesting place to be.
Yeah. I mean, because like for a while, like most of those game engines that were able to do that would have been like Game Maker and like Construct and stuff like that, where, it was 2D games and they had the basic out-of-box tool set that could handle, a 2D workload. But nowadays, like Unity and Unreal, of course, are 3D first, and then 2D was kind of a bit more shoved in after as those games get a bit more popular. But as their support goes up, you can like do quite a bit right out of the box, which is the kind of important thing, especially when someone's making their first game, which is, where typically how indie is going to start. You're going to be making kind of your first game, or maybe your first kind of personal projects that kind of expand more. And the less roadblocks you have to actually finishing, and the less, barrier to entry there is to the market, it's going to be huge. And a big thing about these engines too is the exportable platforms. Like you can build it in one engine and then deploy it to, PC, phones, consoles, all from there without having to port it or hire a company to port your game for you, which was the standard before.
And I mean, Unity can even compile down to JavaScript now. Like you can compile Unity code to have it run in a browser, which is amazing.
It's getting, like we're getting real interesting, and just like tech wise and pipelines that are being there. Because before, like, it would provide you enough of what you have and build targets, and then you'd have to do a lot of stuff yourself inside of it, because you'd run into like, okay, let's add lighting, and like, okay, well, the default lighting isn't great. But now, as it gets more and more popular, more and more games get made, the company itself makes more and more money. They funnel that back into R&D, into their engine. We're going to kind of see that explosion, and it's going to be it's not going to be a linear growth. It's going to be an exponential. It's going to be all of a sudden they're everywhere. Everyone's using it, and this is just kind of what you do. This is a workflow now. And there's no barrier to entry between, being an indie developer as well as even like a AA studio. A bunch of them have been moving away from their publisher engines to just using, Unreal or using Unity to save on their costs.
And it's been extremely effective for them. Like the rates at which the licenses cost and how those licenses are effective. Like it used to be that you would have to buy a license per seat, per developer to work on your video game. Now it's more about how much money you have made with your video game, and that is what the cost is associated with. I think it's Unreal that doesn't charge you anything until you've made $1 million with your video game, which is pretty insane. Yeah,
Unity's like that now, and we're seeing a lot of tooling like that. I think even Substance Painter, and looking at some other stuff too, like modeling software. They're like, yeah, indie, you can just use us until you make like 100K, and then by the time you're making 100K, you can afford their like 1,000 per seat license, because chances are your teams are fairly small. And then same with you when you're making the millions. I think their pricing point is like, you're not making any money, you're indie. And then if you start making 100K, then there's a cost associated with it. And then if you're making over like, I think if your revenue is like 10 million or 100 million, then there's like the enterprise licensing. And and it makes sense, because by the time your revenue is that high, you're going to hopefully have the profit or have the budget to be able to pay for the tools that are using to make, that quality of things. So it's an interesting way to do it. But now it kind of opens up to, before when you're trying to make games, it's like, okay, well, now I'm sitting in, Paint because Photoshop is expensive kind of thing. Because if you're indie, you're not going to have much money. And if you're AA, you're going to be relying on your publisher to buy these tools. And before they had these licensing things, you can only afford the kind of lower end tools that couldn't do the fancier things. But it's really nice to see that, hey, it's kind of like a loan in a sense of, we're going to kind of let you use our expensive software for cheap. But, if your thing works out and you make a lot of money, then we make a lot of money too. And it seems kind of like a win-win.
Here's the whole core behind that idea really started in the IT world, actually. That I see. And in like early days, new hardware, they'd start giving the hardware to schools. Like, here, teach the kids on this. Teach them on this. And it was an investment from them, because it's a significant piece of hardware that they're giving out. But then what happens is you graduate, you get out of school, and that's what you did all your schooling on. That's the hardware you know. So when you go get your job, that's what you're most comfortable working on.
Mm-hmm. Or if you start a business. That's what you know the best.
Yeah. So what are you going to use when you have the option and the choice, and you're put into a position where you have that ability to choose what direction you go? You're going to go with what you know best. You're going to go with what you're most comfortable with. You're going to go with what you know does the job. So for them to say, here, use these tools to make your game. And they're like, yay, I'm a kid, and I can just, look, I can use all these real tools. When you go to do it on a professional level, that's what you're comfortable with. That's what all your most, that's what your set is with. That's what you're going to want to use. You're going to tell them, well, if you want me to do my job the best, you should give me this application.
It's very effective.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see too, because it's, that for the most part too, especially for small businesses, like I've been working for, or we were a small business for a long time. So we've been kind of relying on those small business licenses for the kind of enterprise software. And, for them at their price point, a couple seats isn't always even worth it to them. They kind of want the massive kind of contracts, the massive size scale. So to them, it's kind of makes sense to lower the fees for smaller companies, because, even if they were to charge them full price, overall, it's still not making them that much money compared to what's going on. But you give it to them when they're small, they get used to it. It's built into their workflow, their ecosystem. Then when they grow big and they, you know, have the money and the team size to get the full license, now they have it, and you've basically kind of guaranteed yourself, you know, a client. If they fizzle out in small, well, they would have fizzled out in even faster if they had to pay full price for your software anyways.
Yep. Yeah, it also helps strangle out competition, unfortunately, but that's just the business decision side of it. You know, your competitors are probably focusing on lots of the little guys, and that's how your competitors are getting up and coming. You know, we're cheaper, so we market to the smaller people. So if you just take your big high-end one and go, you know what, all you little guys, you can just use it for free. It takes a chunk out of your opponents.
Yeah, another big thing is student licenses. Anyone out there who's a student currently, if you have a student email, look at everything that you can and get as much student licenses as you can. Because for a long time, for the most part, you can get most stuff for free. If you're a developer, look at the GitHub education pack. There's a whole bunch of stuff compiled together to give you access to, and you get like AWS credits, DigitalOcean credits, get a bunch of other kind of cool dev things that you just get to learn and try out and learn and get exposed to that you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise, because you have to pay for these things. As well as if you're an artist side of things, there's, you know, education packs for almost, I think most things are doing that now. Like I was looking at Substance Painter recently because I kind of wanted to learn that. I was looking at Houdini because I kind of wanted to learn that. And I'm like, I'm a student. I may not be in school directly related to that, because before you would have to go through your school, but nowadays it's just kind of, can you provide us some proof that you're just in school in general, which is usually just a photo of your student ID or, you know, a school email. And they'll just give you free licenses. You'll get a free license for a year or two just to try it. There's typically like a stipulation with it saying like, okay, well, you can't use this to, you know, make a production ready product. But it's still nice to have it to learn. You don't have to, you know, pay it if you want to play around with it or get exposed to it. And some of the times these licenses do also say, you know, okay, we'll give you this license for free. And you can make commercial things up to it for free until, you know, 100K revenue. If you make more than 100K revenue, then you have to pay for a license. But
yeah,
it's one of the things, again, where if you're making 100K revenue, you can probably afford the $1,000 software fee.
One thing I wanted to clarify there, it's not that you can't make production ready stuff on it. You can't release production ready stuff on that license.
Yeah.
You can make it, and then when you're ready to release it and have it done, invest in the license. That can be done.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point of that as well. Doesn't prevent you from doing that. You can still make it everything, and then at any time you can upgrade your license. Which is, I think, is cool, because as a student forever and probably still going forward, you know, I can't always be buying a lot of the software that I need. So it's nice to have that. And it's nice to have that kind of exposure, you know, to do things if I'm working on projects, and, you know, be able to still learn the things I want to do, especially even for schools themselves now, right? A lot of times, a lot of school programs had to rely on the free software that's out there because it doesn't make sense for them to, you know, purchase all that. And then now they can just, you know, sign up as an institution and get a bunch of licenses from them, which is fantastic.
Yep. And like I talked about earlier, training the young minds on your software just trains a whole new generation of workers to use your gear going forward. It's all good ideas.
How to cement yourself as an industry standard.
Yeah, pretty much. Any questions? Did we not cover anything that anybody wanted to hear about middle market AA games and how they're not declining in the market? Yeah, well, I guess they've declined in market percentage.
Yeah.
That's
it's
what
not
we
that
discovered. They're still there.
It's just they didn't grow like everything else grew. So in an overall perspective, the market share has declined.
I just got here, so nope. Well, I mean, you should have more
There's always
questions
the
if you
bot.
just got here, right? We haven't just taught you everything. I guess you don't even know what you don't know. That's the problem. You should watch the VOD.
Also high acid.
Yes, welcome, Acid.
All right. Is it free video games time?
It's free video games time. This popping up over there, over here, over everywhere. I got it. All the games have been claimed from last week.
I've just been staring at these gears a lot lately. Mesmerizing.
What is free video games time? So since the pandemic started, we have been giving away video games to people who support the channel as a way to encourage people to, stay inside, not get sick, but still have something fun to do. We've given out, I think, about 100 games now, maybe more. So we give them out as part of a draw. And the way that we've done things so far is if you give bits to the channel, if you sub to the channel, if you give gift subs to the channel, your name gets entered in a draw. And every time you support the channel, you get another entry in the draw. And then we draw from a list of people who have supported the channel and give them video games.
Really,
Generally,
it's something
from our list.
Yeah, I was going to say, really, it's something to do with all those extra humble games we have that we haven't been able to do anything with.
Yeah, we may have had quite the library of humble games between us.
But I just don't like seeing these games go to waste, and I would love to give them to people that will actually play them where I'm not. Yeah, Twitch is pay to win. It absolutely is. Can't deny it. All denying it does is put you at a disadvantage. All it does. Okay. Got that. Where's my other bot now? There you are. And refresh the list, because the list just got longer. There we go. Huh? What? I have way too many to play that I haven't even touched. Yep.
It's a good problem to have.
Yep.
Well, probably most of us at this point.
But
yeah, I have a lot of great games in my Steam inventory that I have never fired up.
I want to say that there have actually been a number of games that we have given out that people have played and turned around and told me that they really enjoyed.
That's great.
Oh, good.
Killing Floor 2 is one of those.
Yeah, KF2 is great.
I love that game. So grindy, but finally level 20. Woo. Good to maybe prestige someday.
I mean, yeah, it's grindy, but that's just the main game loop of it, right?
Yeah.
I wish it was just like a little bit less grindy.
Yeah, I wish there was like
just a little bit.
Like objectives that you could do that would like speed that up or something. Because it can take quite a while, or even if like the leveling was just slightly strung out more, so you can kind of like get that dopamine hit more often. Because I think 25 is the max, and it like I've played like it's like support is my number one class, and it takes me forever now to level up. And if it was like 50 and a bit more padded, even if like levels don't matter much, it still feels like you're, even if the time was the same from 0 to 25 as opposed to 0 to 50, it just feels like you're progressing faster or more, or something is actually kind of happening, right? It kind of sucks to play for a couple hours and see that you only gained like 20% of the level that you need, and it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
So you'd rather
especially when you're swapping between classes. Like I play medic, commando, and sharpshooter, and all of them are just stuck at 15.
I think like my next highest one is only like 13 or something like that. Most of mine are still below 10 besides like support.
Hey, you don't poo-poo on MMOs.
I mean, we do it all the time.
That's not allowed.
Nowadays. Until we get another good one.
Well, no, not MMOs as a whole. You can poo-poo on specific MMOs. That's fine. But not as a genre. They're my love and my baby.
Hate grind that doesn't feel rewarding. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about. Like the difference is
there are good MMOs.
Making that grind give you the dopamine hit at appropriate times.
Yeah, like I was talking about with Loop Hero. It's way too slow at the beginning. Like it was like 4 loops before I got Rift was my favorite. I loved Rift. The rating in Rift was just something special. The build diversity was something special. But you had to get there.
Yeah, that's always kind of a strange thing with a lot of MMOs too, is that, you know, the game doesn't really start until you've kind of hit that max level. And not everyone enjoys that leveling process. I know me personally, I've got issues with attention span, so it was really hard for me to finally hit that max level. And then, once you do it, like, oh, okay, the game kind of starts now. Like, raiding is a lot of fun. PvP is a lot of fun. But it's like, I kind of hated how I had to slog through a month of quests that, aren't that interesting anymore because I'm 4 or 5 expansions in. So they don't really make sense because the people they're talking about are dead. Or they've scaled the leveling now that you don't have to do all the quests. You're doing like half of them. So now you're just like skipping stuff. And it just, it just becomes like a grind, and it's only rewarding if you get to that end and then have that, you know what at the end of the tunnel, but the actual grind itself is just watching these numbers go up and they take forever. And there's games like RuneScape where the whole point was just to watch the number go up. And I think it's like 50% of the experience you need will take you to 97, and the rest of the 50% is 97 to 99. So it's like, as soon as you hit 97, you're like, congrats, you're halfway there. And it's just brutal. I'm hoping Valheim isn't like that, because I'm in the 90s for some skills now, and it's starting to feel pretty long, and it would really suck if I hit 97, and then it's like, oh, you gotta, put another 100 hours in to get to 98. I'm like, oh no.
No, don't I just die a lot, and I get levels all the time.
Yeah, the dying is brutal. I died like the other day because planes just sucks, and I was at 92 run, and I dropped to 86, and I'm just like, well, that's gonna take me. That took me like almost a whole day or a day and a half to like get back up, and I'm like, oh, I'm back at 92. Hope I don't die again, and it's probably gonna happen because the way I level is running around the planes. But yeah, it scales in percentage the highest you go for that game, so it gets pretty rough. So I'm really hoping that it stays more in a linear curve, so I don't have to, like 97 to 98 doesn't take a week, and then you could lose it in 10 seconds when you get smacked by some sort of goblin.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta. MMOs are a breed, and they're an acquired taste. But when you've done the end game, you understand them, and it's just something special. That's I got into raid leading and guild leading, and I like people. If you didn't know, I like people, and I like talking to people. I quite enjoy it. I do it every chance I get. So I became a guild leader and just recruited people and made a nice big group of my peoples. And then it just grew and grew and grew and grew until I was running 2 guilds and 120 people plus in each guild just to, field a 40-man team every night. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. And I still have friends from those game days today.
You definitely formed like pretty solid bonds, because it does get pretty stressful, the stuff you're taking, and you do have to kind of get on everyone's schedule and take a lot of time to do it.
Yeah.
I never had to do 40 man, and that just sounds like a nightmare to organize. Like, my God.
You watched
even
some?
10 is like, I did. You borrowed my computer a few times. And it was like, that's a lot of people. Like, even getting 10 people was like hard to do. And like 40, I'm like, hot damn.
Yeah, Guild Wars 2 was uninteresting to me. Diablo 2 I don't want to admit how many hours in, but I still have my Diablo bot. Where you at?
I mostly played a fair bit of WoW, but it was mostly just because like friends were playing, and I finally hit that end cap level and was doing PvP and other stuff and other MMOs. It was just too hard for me to get to that content because questing can kind of just bog me down quite a bit. I played a lot of RuneScape when I was younger too, because that one's a bit simpler. Like, the point of the game is just to click on things, and the questing is a bit more streamlined and has a bit more of a point to it.
Okay, we got to say it right now. Don't buy the D2 remake. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Activision doesn't need your money. They just want it. They're scaring you. They're pretending to be Blizzard and like jumping out and being like, money, and don't throw the money at them. Don't do it.
I'd say there's like a 1 to 2% chance that they can actually pull it off, just because of like, you never know. You never know. You can make like, I'm gonna not be super optimistic, but I'm not gonna sell it out right out of the gate, just because I still have to keep that hope that there still has to be some sort of chance.
It's not a hit and miss. It's just a miss. It's a miss. Even if by some miracle it's a hit, the economy will be botted to death in 2 minutes.
And we'll see. I'll keep neutral and then probably be disappointed.
D2 bots have gotten to the point of interpreting screen pixels and issuing mouse clicks. Okay.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Just don't pre-order it. I mean, we can speculate all we want, but as long as we're not pre-ordering it, it'll really be up to how they do it. And then those initial reviews that come out, hopefully there's no embargo on that.
Yeah,
Good.
not pre-ordering.
No pre-orders.
Okay, that's fine. I've personally just put too many hours into D2 to ever play again. Like I remember when Bariza do Canyon was the best bow in the game. Okay. That was a long time ago. I remember when SOJs were the currency of choice and the Shaco Emerald scam was number 1 on the charts. All right. I've played enough D2.
I'm tempted. I am tempted purely for higher res, but I'm probably not going to get it. And I really want Diablo 4 because I really love action RPGs like Diablo, but it's not going to be what I want it to.
This game just happens to be everywhere. By the way, Canadian Summer, Black Rose, and Doc Gaius Balter
Our winners this week.
Yes. 2 of them will be easier to find than the other, but I see Doc all over the place. I'll find them. Played offline, single player, still don't know the rune words, but have enough years of D2. Game for you see, by yourself, you're never going to find the runes that you need. You're just not. The drop chances are so minuscule. You need to wheel and deal and trade and or run 9 bots 24/7. That always works too. Anyway, this game keeps popping up everywhere I look lately. So Hitman, the complete first season for Canadian Summer. Wilson was it was fine. It's still buggy. It's fine and very unbalanced. We tried to play it again, remember? It was just as buggy and unbalanced as the first time, and we said, hey, let's go play Grim Dawn. So we played Grim Dawn, and then we kept playing Grim Dawn, and kept playing Grim Dawn, and kept playing Grim Dawn. Play Grim Dawn if you didn't play Grim Dawn. Better than Wilson. For Black Rose, Sniper Elite V2.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, I'm a Sniper Elite fan. It's a mindless time sink.
You just click on things, and the animations are really satisfying.
And for Doc Gaius Balter, Hacknet, which is a little indie game.
I have vague memories of that.
Yeah.
What is that?
That's why
game?
that's all I said is it's a little indie game, because that's all I really remember about it. It's like a hacking simulator. 2015, it allows the player to perform simulated computer hacking. Yep.
Have a good night in Korea.
Yeah, sleep well in Korea.
Oh yeah, this thing.
Mm-hmm. That's
This
actually an
game is
interesting
neat.
one. Very indie, but very creative. Yeah,
Very
legit
neat.
hacking
Thumbs up.
simulator. Cool. Okay. I think that was a pretty good panel. I think there was a lot of interesting information there. I think it was a good dissection of the market, where they've been and where they're going. Okay, future projections? Maybe? Future projections before we go? Got a couple minutes?
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think AA will take off if things move to Game Pass type play, like game services. I can really see AA's taking off because they have the quality to capture the play time, and they no longer have to compete on marketing and budget with the AAAs as much. They'll be able to be there and be available for people to play. And I think as more people start trying the AA's, they'll really find out that they actually enjoy them probably more than a bunch of AAA's because of their innovative mechanics.
Yeah, I'm of a very similar mind. I think the streaming services will really help the AA industry. I think they will still struggle a bit. Classic retail until classic retail goes away. Please don't go away. So it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
AAA continues to decrease. Not in number. AAA will increase in number, but lose percentage in market share due to growth of market. AA will grow, as Pseudo said, due to the game services, and then indie is just going to continue to explode due to a dramatic increase in processing power that will continue because it always has, and a dramatic increase in access to toolage.
Yeah, the barrier to entry to making a game has never been lower. It's just going to keep getting better too.
Yeah,
Pretty soon we're going to have almost no programming requirement and probably no modeling requirement. You'll be able to just to kind of build a game, and typically those games are called asset flips now, but I think we're going to get to a point where you can just prototype and build a solid game just off, existing assets, similar to what modders were doing for like Valve Engine, but have it actually still be like a standalone product.
Yep. Okay. So, good panel. Good panel. I'm happy with that. I hope you're happy with that one, Cuddles. Please let us know what you thought of that. This was a user-requested panel. You got a topic you want us to rant and try not to sidetrack too much on? Yeah, hit us up. Use your channel points. Let us know. We'll do our best to stay on your topic. I'm hoping to come back and play a little bit of Elder Gods thingy, because I want to kind of check out that game. I haven't seen it yet. So hopefully I'll see you later tonight. And until I do, I'm Deus.
And I'm Rage.
And I'm Pseudo.
And may all your shots be headshots.